On a cold night in May 1941, a lone German plane crossed the Scottish sky. Hours later, it crashed in a silent field. The pilot survived, and when his name was revealed, the world froze in disbelief. It was Rudolf Hess, Hitler's right-hand man. A secret mission of peace? Treason? Madness? Or a deal that could have changed the war forever? Subscribe now. The truth buried for decades is finally emerging. On a moonless night in May 1941, British radar detected something that should have been impossible. A single aircraft, flying alone, crossing the English Channel from Nazi Germany straight into enemy airspace. No bomber formation, no fighter escort, no distress signal. Just one man in the cockpit, flying toward a fate that would lock him away for the rest of his life. The operators watched their screens in disbelief. Enemy planes didn't do this, not in the middle of the deadliest war in human history. But this one did. The night was cold and silent, the kind of silence that makes soldiers nervous. Anti-aircraft batteries tracked the mysterious plane as it crossed into Scotland, their searchlights sweeping through the darkness like fingers searching for a ghost. And then it vanished. No explosion, no fireball lighting up the sky. Just gone. But something had landed in those Scottish hills, something that would change everything. What the pilot said in the hours that followed was so dangerous, so explosive, that Winston Churchill himself ordered every document sealed, locked away in vaults, hidden from the public, hidden from history, until now. Before we go any further, I want you to do something. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever heard of this case before? Most people haven't, and that's exactly how they wanted it. If this is your first time hearing this story, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to discover will make you question everything you thought you knew about World War II. This is the story of a flight that lasted less than 5 hours, but created a mystery that has haunted the world for 8 decades. Let's begin. May 10th, 1941. Eaglesham, Scotland. David McLean was a simple man, a farmer who worked the land his father had worked, and his father before him. He knew every hill, every stone, every tree on his property. But on this night, he heard something he had never heard before. A roar, low and growing louder, the unmistakable sound of an aircraft engine screaming through the sky. He stepped outside, looked up, and there it was. A dark shape moving fast across the clouds, trailing smoke and fire like a dying comet. He watched as it disappeared behind the hills. Seconds later, a dull, sickening thud echoed across the valley. McLean ran. His boots pounded against the wet grass. His breath came in sharp bursts. He didn't know what he was running toward, only that something terrible had just fallen from the sky. When he reached the crash site, the scene was chaos. Twisted metal scattered across the field, flames licking at the wreckage, the acrid smell of burning fuel mixing with the clean Scottish air. And there, in the middle of it all, tangled in the white silk of a parachute, a man. He was alive. His flight suit was torn. Blood streaked his face. His eyes were open, staring up at the night sky as if searching for something he had lost. McLean approached carefully. The man turned his head. "Ich bin Hauptmann Alfred Horn," he said in heavily accented English. "I have an important message for the Duke of Hamilton." McLean didn't understand. He didn't speak German. He didn't know who the Duke of Hamilton was. He only knew one thing. This man needed help. He called for the Home Guard. Within the hour, British soldiers arrived. They pulled the pilot from the wreckage, restrained him, and began searching through the debris. What they found didn't make sense. Navigation charts marked with a route from Bavaria to Scotland, personal letters written in German, a photograph of a young boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, smiling at the camera, and an ID card. The name on the card wasn't Hauptmann Alfred Horn. It was Rudolf Hess. One of the soldiers read the name aloud. Another laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But the officer in charge didn't laugh. He had seen photographs, newsreels, propaganda films. He knew that face. Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, Hitler's right-hand man, the third most powerful person in the Third Reich, and he had just crashed in a Scottish field. The officer grabbed the radio. His hands were shaking. "Get me London," he said. "Get me London right now. Let me stop here for a moment and let that sink in. Imagine you're a British soldier in 1941. Your country is being bombed every night. Your cities are burning. Your friends are dying. The Nazis are conquering Europe, and it feels like the world is ending. And then one night, one of Hitler's closest advisors literally falls out of the sky into your backyard. Alone. No guards, no weapons, no backup plan. Just him, a plane, and a message. What would you think? Is it a trap? A trick? Some kind of elaborate Nazi scheme? Or is it something else entirely? Leave a comment below and tell me. What do you think was really happening here? Because even now, 80 years later, nobody can agree on the answer. The news reached Winston Churchill while he was having dinner at Ditchley Park, a country estate outside London. He was watching a Marx Brothers film, trying to forget about the war for just one evening. An aide handed him a telegram. Churchill read it once, then again, then a third time. He turned to his guests and said, in that famous growling voice, "Gentlemen, this is extraordinary. Rudolf Hess has arrived in Scotland." The room went silent. One of his advisors asked, "The Rudolf Hess?" Churchill nodded slowly. "Hess, or a double." That phrase, or a double, would echo through history, because from that very first moment, Churchill suspected something was wrong. Something didn't add up. And he was right. They moved Hess to a military hospital. His ankle was fractured, his ribs bruised, but physically he was stable. Mentally, that was a different story. He refused to speak to anyone except the Duke of Hamilton. He kept repeating the same thing over and over. "I have come on a mission of humanity. I have come to prevent bloodshed. I must speak to the Duke." The British didn't know what to do with him. MI6 sent their best interrogators, men trained to break enemy spies, men who had seen every trick, every lie, every deception the Nazis could throw at them. But Hess wasn't like other prisoners. He didn't crack. He didn't panic. He didn't beg. He sat calmly, hands folded in his lap, and told his story with the precision of a man who had rehearsed it 1,000 times. He said he had stolen the Messerschmitt Bf 110 from an airfield in Bavaria, that he had flown it himself, navigating by stars and memory, that he had crossed the Channel alone, evading British defenses, because he had one mission: to stop the war. According to Hess, Germany was about to invade the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. And when that happened, the war would spiral into something apocalyptic. Millions would die. Europe would be destroyed. But if Britain agreed to peace now, if Churchill would just listen, then Germany and Britain could unite against the real enemy: communism. "We are not your enemy," Hess said. "We are brothers. We should not be killing each other. while Stalin waits to devour us both." The interrogators took notes. They asked questions. They pressed him for details. And slowly, a terrifying picture began to emerge. Hess wasn't insane. He was convinced, utterly, completely, fanatically convinced that his mission was just, that he was doing the right thing, that history would remember him as a peacemaker. One MI6 officer later wrote in his diary, "He speaks with the calm certainty of a prophet, but when you look into his eyes, you see something else, desperation, as if he knows, deep down, that he has already failed." The Duke of Hamilton arrived the next day. Hess's face lit up when he saw him. "You remember me," he said, "from Berlin, the Olympics." The Duke hesitated. He did remember meeting Hess briefly at the 1936 Olympics, but it had been years ago. A handshake, a polite conversation, nothing more. "Why did you come here?" the Duke asked. Hess leaned forward. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because you and I, we are reasonable men. We can stop this madness. You have influence. You know people in the government. If you speak to Churchill, if you tell him that peace is possible—" The Duke interrupted. "Mr. Hess, I have no influence. And even if I did, Churchill would never negotiate with Nazi Germany." Hess's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered, just for a moment. He nodded slowly. "Then I have failed," he said quietly. Here's where the story gets really strange. After the initial interrogations, the British government made a decision. They sealed every document related to Hess's mission, every transcript, every photograph, every scrap of evidence. They classified it all under the Official Secrets Act and locked it in government vaults. For 75 years. Why? If Hess was just a crazy Nazi who flew to England on a delusional peace mission, why would they need to hide the files for 3/4 of a century? What was in those documents that was so dangerous it couldn't be revealed for 75 years? Historians tried for decades to access the files. They filed Freedom of Information requests. They appealed to Parliament. They argued that the public had a right to know. But every time, the answer was the same: national security. Even after the war ended, even after the Nazis were defeated, even after Germany was reunited and the Cold War ended, the files stayed sealed. In 1972, a British surgeon named Hugh Thomas published a book that shook the world. He claimed that the man imprisoned in Spandau prison wasn't Rudolf Hess, that the real Hess had died in the crash, or been killed shortly after, and the British had replaced him with a double to cover up secret peace negotiations that Churchill didn't want exposed. Thomas had examined medical records. He had studied photographs. He had interviewed witnesses. And he found discrepancies. The man in Spandau had no scars on his body, but Rudolf Hess had been wounded in World War I. He should have had visible scars. The man in Spandau's handwriting didn't match samples of Hess's writing from before the war. And most damning of all, the man in Spandau seemed to have no memory of his life before 1941. The British government immediately denied the allegations, but they refused to release the files. Pause for a moment. Comment below. Do you think the man in the prison was really Rudolf Hess, or was it someone else? Because this question haunted investigators for decades. August 17th, 1987. Rudolf Hess, or the man claiming to be Rudolf Hess, was found dead in Spandau prison in West Berlin. He was 93 years old. The official cause of death: suicide by hanging. According to the report, Hess had used an electrical extension cord to hang himself in a small garden shed on the prison grounds. But almost immediately, questions arose. First, the physical evidence didn't match. Hess was frail, weak, barely able to walk without assistance. The idea that he could have tied a secure knot, positioned himself, and completed the act seemed medically improbable. Second, the autopsy revealed injuries inconsistent with hanging, bruising on his chest, marks on his wrists. Third, and this is crucial, Hess had been under constant surveillance for 46 years. 4 guards watched him at all times, every movement logged, every conversation recorded. Yet on that day, for exactly 20 minutes, all 4 guards were mysteriously absent. No explanation was ever given. A pathologist who reviewed the case years later made a chilling statement. The physical evidence suggests this was not suicide. The manner of death is consistent with homicide, staged to look like suicide. The British government opened an investigation, then quietly closed it 6 months later. And once again, surprise, surprise, they sealed the files. In 2017, some of the Hess documents were finally released to the public. 76 years after the flight. But when historians opened them, they found entire sections blacked out, names redacted, pages missing. Whatever Hess said in those interrogation rooms, whatever secrets he carried with him to that prison cell, someone still doesn't want the world to know. So what really happened? Let's break down the 3 main theories, and I want you to comment below and tell me which one you believe. Theory 1. The lone fanatic. This is the official story. Hess was delusional. He genuinely believed he could negotiate peace. He acted alone, without Hitler's knowledge, and when he arrived in England, the British realized he was insane and locked him up. Simple, clean, easy to believe. But here's the problem. Hess wasn't insane, at least not in 1941. The interrogators all agreed he was coherent, logical, and calculating. His story never changed. His memory was sharp. So if he wasn't crazy, why did he come? Theory 2. The secret negotiation. Some historians believe Hess was lured to England, that British intelligence, or a faction within the British elite, had been secretly communicating with him through intermediaries, that they promised him safe passage and a meeting with Churchill, and then they betrayed him. This theory is supported by some intriguing evidence. Before the war, Hess had attended high society events in London. He had met British aristocrats, politicians, businessmen. Some of them were sympathetic to Nazi Germany. Some of them believed that Britain and Germany should be allies, not enemies. Could one of these people have sent Hess a message? A secret signal that peace was possible? The Duke of Hamilton's name keeps coming up. He always denied involvement. But in 2017, a private letter surfaced, written by the Duke in 1940, addressed to a German diplomat. The contents remain classified. Theory 3. The cover-up. This is the most controversial theory. What if there were secret peace negotiations happening in 1941? What if powerful people in Britain, maybe even within Churchill's own government, were trying to make a deal with Germany? And what if Hess's sudden, dramatic arrival threatened to expose everything? Think about it. Churchill was under enormous pressure in 1941. Britain was losing. Cities were being bombed nightly. The Soviet Union hadn't entered the war yet. America hadn't entered the war yet. Many believed Britain couldn't win alone. If Hess came to England expecting to meet with sympathetic British officials, and instead found himself arrested and silenced, it would explain a lot. It would explain why the files stayed sealed for 75 years. It would explain why his death was so suspicious. It would explain why, even now, entire sections of the documents remain classified. So, which theory do you believe? Comment below. I read every single one. Let me share something with you that wasn't made public until 2017. In one of the newly released documents, there's a transcript of an interrogation session from May 1941. The interrogator asks Hess, "Who were you supposed to meet when you arrived in England?" Hess pauses. Then he says something chilling. "I cannot tell you their names, but they are powerful, and if this mission fails, they will deny everything." The interrogator presses. "Are you saying there are Nazi sympathizers in the British government?" Hess smiles. "I am saying there are people in every government who understand that this war is madness, and some of them are willing to do whatever it takes to stop it." The transcript ends there. The next 12 pages are completely redacted. Why? What did Hess say in those pages that was so dangerous the British government couldn't let anyone read it, even 76 years later? There's another document, a memo from Churchill to his intelligence chief, dated May 12, 1941, just 2 days after Hess arrived. It reads, "The Hess affair must be contained. No publicity, no speculation. We cannot allow the public to believe that elements within our government were negotiating with the enemy. The consequences would be catastrophic." Read that again. Churchill didn't say, "Hess is insane." He didn't say, "This is a Nazi trick." He said, "We cannot allow the public to believe that elements within our government were negotiating with the enemy." That's not a denial. That's damage control. In 1989, 2 years after Hess's death, a former British intelligence officer named Colonel Eugene Byrd published a book based on conversations he'd had with Hess during his time as a guard at Spandau. According to Byrd, Hess told him something extraordinary in one of their final conversations. Hess said, "I didn't come to England expecting to meet Churchill. Churchill would never negotiate. I came because I was told there were others, men with power, men who wanted peace. But when I arrived, they had already decided. I was too dangerous to be free, so they locked me away, and they will never let me out, because if I speak, empires will fall." Byrd asked him, "What empires?" Hess smiled. "All of them." The book was immediately attacked by historians as unreliable. Byrd was accused of fabricating quotes. The British government called it sensationalist fiction. But they never sued him. They never challenged him legally. They just ignored it. Why? Today, if you drive through the Scottish countryside near Eaglesham, you'll find a small stone marker. It sits in a field, surrounded by grass and wildflowers, and it marks the spot where Rudolf Hess's plane crashed on that cold night in May 1941. Most people pass by without noticing it. But if you stop, if you stand there in the silence, if you close your eyes and listen to the wind coming down from the hills, you can almost feel it, the weight of history, the ghosts of unanswered questions. Rudolf Hess spent 46 years in prison, longer than any other Nazi war criminal, longer than men who committed unspeakable atrocities, longer than generals who ordered massacres. Why? He never recanted his story. He never gave a full confession. He never explained who sent him or who he was supposed to meet. In his final letter to his son, written shortly before his death, he wrote, "I have kept the secret. I will die with the secret. And perhaps that is for the best. Some truths are too dangerous to be spoken aloud." The flight lasted less than 5 hours, but its shadow still stretches across history, And somewhere in a locked vault beneath London, the full truth waits, waiting for the day it can finally be told. Or maybe it never will be, because some secrets are meant to stay buried, some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, and some questions are too dangerous to answer. Before you go, I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard this story before? Most people haven't, and that's exactly how powerful governments wanted it. If this is your first time learning about Rudolf Hess's secret flight, hit that subscribe button right now. Because there are dozens of World War II cases just like this one. Stories that were buried, hidden, classified for decades. And we're bringing them all to light. Drop a comment below and tell me, which theory do you believe? 1. Hess was a lone fanatic who acted alone. 2. He was lured to England and betrayed by British intelligence. 3. He was silenced because he knew about secret peace negotiations that would have destroyed Churchill's government. I read every comment. And your theory might be featured in our next video. And if you want to dive deeper into declassified World War II mysteries, check out the video on screen right now. Because the war didn't end in 1945. The secrets just went underground. And we're digging them up, one cold case at a time.